Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by The Athletic. Today on the show, one of my colleagues over at The Athletic, Eric Nehm, is back. I feel like last time we did this, there was like a probably 2-year gap in between your appearances on the show. And now we're getting you back like a month and a half later. This is great. I'm excited to have you here, Eric.
I was going to say 2 weeks, but maybe it's been longer than that. It feels like 2 weeks.
So there was news today overnight while I was sleeping. Eric obviously was awake and got a chance to talk about this and break it all down as it was happening. Damian Lillard is now a Milwaukee Buck, the team that Eric covers over in Milwaukee. Damian Lillard has been traded finally. And I got to be honest, I'm excited about this. I kept talking about Damian Lillard to the Bucks as like the sleeper team the whole way. I felt like that was the thing that made the most sense to me, frankly, outside of Miami. And I felt like it was the easiest way to get Jrue involved in a deal if you wanted to, kind of change the core of this Bucks team. Just before we dive into all of this, I want to read off the details of this deal so that everybody can kind of let it sink in if you haven't heard yet. The Bucks acquire Damian Lillard. The Blazers acquire Jrue Holiday, DeAndre Ayton, Toumani Camara, a 2029 first-round pick from the Milwaukee Bucks, and 2 pick swaps, I believe, in 2028 and 2030. The Phoenix Suns acquire Jusuf Nurkic, Nasir Little, Keon Johnson, and Grayson Allen. We'll talk about whatever the fuck the Suns are doing here momentarily. But from each team's perspective, it's basically for the Bucks, Jrue Holiday, a pick, 2 pick swaps, Grayson Allen for Damian Lillard. For the Blazers, they get DeAndre Ayton, Jrue Holiday, Toumani Camara, all of this draft capital. For Damian Lillard, Keon Johnson, Nasir Little. For the Suns, it's what is it? It's going to be Ayton, Camara, and I think that's it for Nurkic, Little, Keon Johnson, and Grayson Allen. So let's dive in and talk about the Bucks side of this. I'll just give you the floor here, Eric, because this is the team you know better than anybody. What was your immediate thought when the Milwaukee Bucks acquired Damian Lillard today?
That's an aggressive play. That's a really aggressive play. And, I just think it's really interesting to try to put all of it together because Damon Giannis, that is a pairing that works really well together. Throughout Giannis's career, I know it's always kind of been a question to me. It's like, who's the best passer that Giannis has ever played with? Who's the best pick and roll partner he's ever played with? And I mean, the answer to both might be Chris Middleton. And again, Chris Middleton's a fantastic player, and no one is ever going to hear me saying anything other than that because he has been now for years. But that isn't what you're imagining when you're imagining pick and roll basketball. You're imagining a point guard with a bigger player, and you're really stressing out the defense as much as possible. It's not 2 wings. It's not a wing big and a big. It is a point guard and a big. And this is something that Giannis just has not been a part of really throughout his entire career. They've tried some stuff. DJ Augustine came in for a little bit before they traded for PJ Tucker during the championships. Like they've tried some other stuff.
And for people, can you understand why Jrue was, or can you explain for people why Jrue was not that guy?
And so Jrue Holiday was a good pick and roll partner. He's an undeniably creative player, but at the same time, he's not going to be that, one dribble pull up 3 kind of guy. He can do that, and he did some of that this year, and that's why he flirted with an all NBA type of thing, or an all NBA type of honor. But he doesn't do that, and you saw in the playoffs over and over again, the Heat this year, the Celtics in previous years, the Nets and the Suns and the Hawks in previous years. Essentially, when a point guard would get into a pick and roll with Giannis, the other team just said, cool, you want to shoot? It's all yours. You can shoot as many times as you want because we are not going to allow the rim destroying freak of nature to run free down the middle of the lane. We are going to help. We are going to sag. We are going to tag. We are going to do whatever is humanly possible to slow him down and not let him have the rim. And plenty of times it didn't matter, right? You built the wall. He jumped over the top of it. Euro stepped around it, whatever. It was still that. But at the base of it, it was always we can sag off of that point guard or take our time getting back to that point guard, because while they might beat us on a couple possessions, you can't beat us all night doing that. Eventually, you want to get it to Giannis. And if you do that to Dame Lillard, he will put 50 on you.
Yes.
Plain and simple. If you decide that that's a coverage you can accept because you want to slow down Giannis, Dame will put 50 on you, and you're most likely going to lose. Your only chance will be to score with them. And this is just something that the Bucks have not had over the years. So honestly, the fit is so simple and easy that, I think a lot of times you worry about, the talent that you're adding 5 days before training camp or whatever it is that we're about to start. But like, this one's pretty simple. You traded a point guard and a shooting guard for a point guard. You got a point guard that's more talented with the ball in his hands. And that point guard happens to be one of the 75 greatest players of all time. Third team All NBA last year that scored 32 points per game and averaged 7 assists per game. Has been one of the most dangerous players off the bounce from the moment he stepped into the league almost a decade ago. That's easy. Like offensively, that pairing is very simple. And even if you still want to have Giannis with the ball in his hands a lot and attacking, Dame Lillard can spread the floor. He's a great shooter. He will knock that down. And then that's not even getting into like the other options, right? Like we're talking about Chris Middleton, who averages 20 points per game every season now for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. He's a third option that isn't quote unquote going to get thought about. Good luck slowing that down, that dude down with very little offensive attention. And oh, by the way, there's a fourth option, Brook Lopez, who, if you decide to do something crazy in the pick and roll, could get a mismatch in the post and go to work. He could space to the corner and make sure that Giannis has the maximum amount of space possible. You could run a Spain pick and roll and set the most devastating Spain screen in the history of Spain screens with Brook Lopez in the middle. You could do so many things. The offensive combinations that you can get from those four alone, and we can go further down the roster and the depth and the rest of that, but just at its base, like if you're just talking about how this works with the key pieces of the Milwaukee Bucks, it's pretty simple.
I think people are I've seen some people question like how much better are the Bucks now than they were. How much does this really improve them? Jrue Holiday was really good. Jrue Holiday is really good. Jrue Holiday is great. I think people are way overthinking this. The level to which Damian Lillard is an upgrade on Jrue Holiday offensively is drastic. And it's specifically drastic in the ways that Eric just outlined that are going to make it exceptionally devastating for defenses to try and stop. Having that pull-up threat that Giannis has never had is in the ball screen scenario is going to make it almost impossible to guard 1-4, 1-5 ball screens, whatever you want to call Giannis, basically Dame Giannis ball screens. Having Brook Lopez spacing to the corner or playing in Spain pick and rolls, like you just said, is devastating because he can shoot threes at a 37% clip and can handle switches in ball screens or can pick and pop if you want Dame to run the second unit. This also allows you to just have Chris run the second unit if you want to, and that's been happening for a few years. But the level to which Chris is going to have to expend less energy offensively now trying to create everything is going to lead to a trickle down with his energy level being able to be expended on the second unit, in my opinion. So it's going to be insane. This should be, I think, the best offense in the NBA, point blank. I don't actually see at the very least, maybe Dallas could get there, maybe Sacramento could get there. At the very least, in terms of how it translates to basketball at the highest levels, this should be the best offense, I think, in the NBA and the hardest thing to stop, because I actually don't know how you deal with Giannis now if you have 4 shooters around him on the court, and the Bucks have enough to where they can make that work, or they can go acquire one if they need to.
I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think through other offenses and like what the Suns are going to be really cool to watch this year.
Yep.
The Warriors are always good. Like there's other teams out there that are going to be really interesting, but I think a number of those teams kind of come with questions about fit in how this works, in who's stepping on whose toes, in how you're getting into action. Just there's more questions. This to me just all feels incredibly clean. And you mentioned like the 1-4 pick and roll kind of being unstoppable. And the thing I've been thinking about since the trade kind of occurred is like for years you've watched Draymond Green, one of the all-time processors of the game, get to work out of 4-on-3 advantages, right? Like that's the whole thing. He's in the middle pick and roll with Steph. Steph gets so much attention. Clay gets so much attention. You give him the ball in the middle of the floor, and then he makes the right decision. If you put things together the right way, Giannis Antetokounmpo will have a one-man advantage. And as we've seen before, typically if you don't have +1 defenders in Giannis's way and build up the wall, you're not stopping him. So now you're going to be down 2 defenders and somehow need to, 1, stop him from getting to the basket. But if you do commit all of your resources to getting it to that spot and stopping him in the basket, it is a kick out to Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, Malik Beasley, Pat Connaughton. You can
Bobby
keep going.
Portis is still there.
Bobby
Like,
Portis, you can go down
yeah.
the line, and it's just going to be really tough. I think one thing that maybe gets overlooked initially, Terry Stotts is on the staff here in Milwaukee. Terry Stotts has plenty of sets in the playbook for Damian Lillard, how to get Damian Lillard free. And if I had a guess, I would guess Terry's pretty excited about the idea that he can now run some plays that have Giannis running down the lane in Jusuf Nurkic's spot, or whoever you want to say. I would guess he can think up some pretty creative stuff. So I think offensively, everything's going to be really good. And I don't think it's going to take a long time. I think there are defensive questions. That part of it is probably undeniable.
So,
but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'm like less worried about that, I guess. But I've always thought the Jrue was the third most important part of that defense. Sure. Like I've always thought Brook is 1 and Giannis is 2. And as long as they have those 2, it's going to be just about impossible to score on the interior. And that remains true. Basically, all you need is Dame to give effort fighting over the top in drop coverage. And as long as he's willing to do that, and I think he will, like you're probably going to be okay. Look, it probably is. They probably need one of Marjon Beauchamp or Andre Jackson to like really step up and be an impactful defensive player. But with how much they're still going to be able to completely shut off the paint offensively, I think it's going to be really, really hard for teams to like you're just living and dying with potentially like walk-in pull-up threes, or they still have the ability to go small and play Giannis at the 5 and then try and finagle a way around that. Maybe it's like Beauchamp and like you have Beauchamp like guard like the better wings. It's I'm less worried about the defense, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
So I think
And but by the way, when I say Jrue was the third most important defender,
sure.
I mean no disrespect to Jrue. I think both Brook and Giannis are top 10 defenders in the league. Drew's unbelievable, but continue. I just wanted to make that clear.
Sure. I agree that like the the backbone of any NBA defense is going to be at the rim and how you're protecting the rim. That's just kind of how these things work. It's pretty rare that you're going to anchor everything with really strong perimeter defense. You're going to need someone at the rim to do it. So I do think Brooke and Giannis are capable of covering for a lot of mistakes. I think the tough part is trying to figure out exactly how you set up the levers and pulleys on both sides of the ball to make sure you're getting what you need on both ends. And what I
Mhm.
mean by that is, you know, in the past, it would be Chris Middleton is going to have the ball in his hands at the end of games. So you're going to kind of have to save up his energy. And all right, that means for the first 3 quarters, you can't have Chris on Kevin Durant. But in crunch time, you can have Chris on Kevin Durant. He can cover him. That's what we saw in the 2021 second round playoff series against the Nets. Like you can kind of do those things. So how low can you turn Chris's workload, effort, whatever, offensively to get what you need defensively? Same thing with Giannis. Last year, he has the highest usage rate of his career by a pretty wide margin. I'm sure he'll be delighted to bring that down some and use some more space with Dame. But again, you have to figure out how much can you bring this down and then conversely pull up what he's doing defensively. So all of those things are going to be so like while I think there's some parts of this that are pretty easy and simple to figure out pretty much from the get-go and they'll be fine, I do think there are some other things that are going to be a little bit touchy and you're going to have to figure that out. The Bucks have been talking about playing a more aggressive defensive style and trying to get out in transition and create more steals and turnovers. If you do that, you're asking for even more from Brook Lopez, even more from Giannis Antetokounmpo. Can you try to be that aggressive defensively and not compromise Dame? Can Chris
Yep.
Middleton survive in that same way? Or is the offense so good with those 4 guys that we've mentioned, the Bucks core 4 guys, that you
Yeah.
just say screw it and you put someone out there like Marjan Beauchamp, who's 6'7" and is long armed and can just kind of move around and just say, hey, you don't need to do anything on offense, man. Like if you're open, shoot it. But other than that, defensively, we need everything from you. Andre Jackson Jr., a guy that you adore. Can
Yeah.
you do the same? He's a rookie, so it's probably not going to work out for this season. But like, how do you, Pat Connaughton? Hey, you're not going to do much on offense. We need more from you on defense. Like, how do you kind of get all of that? Because I do think they don't have the one-on-one wing defenders that I think a lot of teams are looking for and
Yeah.
want during the postseason because you're absolutely going to play a big wing at some point that's super talented, and you're going to have to defend that dude. Last year, they tried to put Jrue on Jimmy Butler, and it did not work. I'm of the
Yeah.
belief that Giannis can do a little bit more of that than Bud ever allowed him to do. But
It
again,
seems like he wants to, for what it's worth, too.
for
Like
sure.
he brings
But
it up.
but at the same time, if he's doing that offensively, how much can you do over there? So like that to me, it's not a situation where I think they're screwed defensively. It's a
Yeah. But
situation where it's like, okay, can they be 15 throughout the year and have the number one offense, which seems
yeah.
likely, and then turn it up in the postseason? I think what you want to do as a team is make sure you can get buckets in the playoffs, and then the
Yeah.
defense tends to figure itself out. But over the years, we've seen teams win the other way. So, like, I just think that give and take, the pull of how you try to figure all that out is going to be fascinating to see because I do think they're at a slight deficit defensively, even with 2 incredibly talented defenders like Giannis and Brooke.
The thing with Giannis taking on more responsibility defensively is that he's always had to create so much offensively. He doesn't
Yeah,
have to do that anymore.
for
Damian
sure.
Lillard is here. Damian Lillard is coming off of his best season individually in the NBA. He averaged 32 points last year, 7 assists. He shot 46, 37, 91. He had a true shooting percentage that was 11% above league average. That is his career high in terms of that metric. Even though he was surrounded by that team he was surrounded by in Portland. That's ridiculous. Damian Lillard is getting better. He is unbelievably good. Here are the other 2 things that I want to talk about. before we move on to talk about some of these other teams. I think that the Bucks' best chance to retain Giannis was shaking things up. I think they had to do something. Whether or not it was this, whether or not it was something else, I think they had to do something. I think that this is the best possible move that they could have made in order to convince Giannis to sign at the end of this season. I respect what Jrue Holiday brought to the table. I also thought it was very, very interesting that yesterday there was a big takeout feature on Jrue Holiday, basically where he said, like, look, I know I've commented before, I think on Andre Iguodala and Evan Turner's podcast, saying that, I might retire after this contract, but I'm not going to do that. I've kind of been working under the assumption that, like, it was a possibility, at least, whether or not it would happen or not. I thought that getting Dame in that way, where Dame is going to play at least for the next 4 years, let's say, allowed the Bucks real certainty to provide to Giannis that, hey, we're still going for it around you, and we got you one of the best 75 players in NBA history around you. I think that lines up better with trying to get Giannis to re-sign, which is ultimately the whole ball game now for Milwaukee.
So I think there's a number of avenues, right? The Bucks could have gone here, right? Like there's the idea that, that now that he's mentioned it, blow it up and trade him. And that was never going to happen. The Bucks have always been very aggressive and done what they've needed to try to do to try to keep him around. And I think this summer they're in a spot where, while I'm sure they would have loved to, make a crazy move, they pretty much just had to bring Chris back. They pretty much had to bring Brooke back and line themselves up for something in the future. And this was kind of like the one move that, man, trading Jrue Holiday is really hard. And not just because he's a great player. He's a great person. He's been a great teammate. Everybody loves him. And if you're the organization, that was the guy that you traded for that won you the championship in 2021. And I'm not trying to say he's the reason why they won. They had great efforts from Giannis and Chris and the whole team. But if you have a soul, if you have a heart, you have that sentimentality where it's like, this is the guy that got it done with us, right? Like he did it. And now I have to trade that guy away. Man, that's really hard. And I've compared this trade a lot, and my story at The Athletic is getting posted here in a second, but like I've compared this trade to the Jrue Holiday trade in 2020. You had the same sort of uncertainty about Giannis and whether or not he's going to sign a Supermax extension and kind of what was going to happen there. And John Horst decided to make a bold move, and he traded his all defensive point guard along with a bevy of picks and got himself Jrue Holiday, who at the time, there was some idea, is it that much of an upgrade? Well, it ended up being that, but that time you had come up short. And I think it's easier when you've come up short to not have that sentimentality, like not feel like you owe anyone anything. And in this situation, you have Jrue Holiday, who did win the thing with you and who has been great, who signed an extension in the year after the championship. Like he's been great, and you have to give that up. And to trade a guy like that, you needed someone as talented as Dame Lillard. If it's not someone that talented, I don't think you can do it. Like, I don't think you can make that shakeup move just to make the shakeup move, because you're not proving anything to Giannis. If you're just shaking it up for the sake of shaking it up, you need to show that kind of linear progress. And I think Dame Lillard is undeniably a step up from Jrue Holiday. No matter what I think of Jrue Holiday, I think a lot of them, I think he's a great player. Dame Lillard's better. And that's the kind of move you make and the signal that you make to Giannis. And again, it's up to him when he wants to sign an extension, if he wants to sign an extension, how many years he wants to sign an extension. All of that is still up to him. But this is a move that is serious talent. This is a true upgrade. While there might be some people that are going to argue with you or me about this being a massive upgrade or an upgrade that makes them undeniably the favorites for the NBA title, I don't think there's an argument to be made that Jrue Holiday is better than Dame Lillard. Like, Dame's better. And I think that's the kind of message you can send to Giannis and be like, hey man, we are really pushing and going for this.
And signed longer as well. Like, he's now cost controlled, which is big. Whether or not that's it's a big number that he's cost controlled at, but he's cost controlled.
It is.
The other, I just want to note here, this is by far the best team Lillard has ever played with. And I'm like truly fascinated to see what that looks like. I think it's, he's always been the underdog. It feels like in some ways when it comes into the playoffs, that's not going to be the case anymore. And I want to see that. I think it's going to be really, really fun to watch. Let's take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to talk about this from the Blazers' perspective, finally cashing in on Lillard. Okay, we're back. I want to talk about this from the Blazers' perspective because I like this return a lot more than some people seem to. And I want to hear another opinion on it. So, first and foremost, I think I'm a little bit higher on Deandre Ayton than some people are, as far as like, I think that he's overpaid, but if you're Portland, you probably don't really care about the money that on DeAndre is paid because you're rebuilding now and you need somebody on a max contract anyway. So if you like DeAndre, you might as well go for it. And we'll talk more about the fit with DeAndre momentarily here. Jrue Holiday, to me, definitely has less value than Damian Lillard, and I would expect him to get less than Damian Lillard in a trade. The other piece of this for Jrue Holiday, though, is that Holiday is a much more fungible asset in a trade for other teams to go and acquire. You can get so many more teams involved in a Jrue Holiday sweepstakes now than you can in a Damian Lillard sweepstakes, in part because Damian Lillard, artificially limited the market through some of his words, right? Like, if you are the Blazers now, and we'll talk about a couple of fake trades I like momentarily here. If you're the Blazers now, like, you can go to Boston, to Golden State, to Dallas, to Toronto, to Miami. You could try and literally like ask Miami for the same exact things that you asked for Damian Lillard. And Miami like might not have a recourse to say no, because at the end of the day, Jrue is still probably the best player on the market right now. So you still dictate the market in a real way. And you also get DeAndre Ayton plus this draft capital. And I want to focus on the draft capital with you momentarily before we kick into anything else. I think this draft capital is the best I'd seen from all of the other teams. You get the 2029 pick that is unprotected, I believe. Right, Eric? You get the 228 and 30 pick swaps. And this is all after this Bucks core ages out. Like, Brook Lopez is 35. Chris Middleton's 32, and his deal goes through 2026. Damian Lillard is 33. His deal goes through 2027. Giannis is 29. Giannis turns 29 in December. But, like, I don't know how he's going to age. You talk to people around the league, like, there's real question about just how that physical, brutish style where he's taking contact, taking bumps every single play down the court without having really improved as a shooter throughout the course of his career is going to mature as he gets into his early 30s, let's call it. How long does his prime extend out? He's always going to be a good player, but like, there's a tangible difference if Milwaukee has Giannis at 33, 34 years old, which he'd be at the end of where these picks are trying to come through. And he's like a top 40 player in the league as opposed to a top 3 player in the league. How do you feel about the picks here? I feel like the picks are more valuable than the Miami picks and Toronto picks because of the way that Milwaukee's roster is currently set.
Yeah, I mean, so The tough part for me is always I'm always curious to see how willing a general manager or front office is to trade for something that's like the absolute furthest that a team can give
Yeah.
up, because you are correct in saying that, like, if you're talking about trying to trade for, the picks for the time when the Bucks get bad, these have a lot bigger chance than the ones that the Pelicans did, right? Like the Pelicans got the picks from the Jrue Holiday trade, and that's great. But also the Bucks are probably still going to have talented players at that time, and you weren't going to see top 10 picks. There's a much greater chance here. Is Cronin still going to have a job when those picks come through?
So
Uh,
here'd be
like,
my case against that. You still have the Jrue Holiday trade asset to
sure,
be able to go get the current value. You've gone now and gotten what might be the most valuable long-term value
that's
with
fair.
these Bucks picks. You still have this Jrue asset that you're probably going to move.
Yeah,
And now you can go get the short-term value. Look, it's an incomplete trade package at this point, right? Because we don't
for
know what
sure.
Jrue is going to be. But that's why I think a little bit higher on this than what I've seen, like people saying this is like horrible for Portland, and I just like don't agree with that whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, so I do think there's like a couple things here. First, like, that's very forward thinking. And I think sometimes there's not GMs out there that are willing to do it because they're not sure that they're going to have a job. Be like, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
those are the picks that we want. We need them closer. So I do think in your line of thinking of trying to add up all the picks, yeah, it's probably going to work out the best to have the most value possible late. I think when we're talking about Holiday, you did mention the fact that he had done an interview with the other beat writer here in Milwaukee, Jim Ozarski with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and had dispelled the rumor that he had. I guess it's not a rumor because he himself started it on a podcast and said at the end of this contract, I'm going to retire.
yeah,
But in doing so, he said, I was in a different place at that time, and now I'm happy, and I'm happy to win, and I'm happy with the place that I am, and Milwaukee is, as he said many times before, like Milwaukee's a place that he wants to be, and that's great. Except he's not Milwaukee anymore, and I'm not saying he can't find a great place somewhere else.
yeah.
That's not what I'm saying at all. But I do think if you're one of those other teams, you are going to have to vet the situation. You are going to have to know, like, all right, we don't know what your extension situation is. You're not extension eligible until February 22nd, I think, if I remember the date correctly,
Mm-hmm.
coming up here in 2024. That is where I'd have some concern about the value. Overall, I do agree with like the idea that he's more attractive to more teams because his contract is better and he plays defense and he can play multiple positions and he's not going to dominate the ball in the same ways that Damian Lillard is. But I will say, like, that is one thing that I do think you have to vet if you're another team. Like, yes, Jrue Holiday was happy to sign an extension from Milwaukee and keep playing here, but it I'm obviously biased because I live in Milwaukee. And I'm not talking about the weather. It's pretty nice in Milwaukee right now. Giannis is here. Chris is here. Brooke is here. You're going to keep winning. That might not be the case elsewhere. So I do wonder if that question that we thought had been taken out is now put back into play because he's no longer here in Milwaukee.
So just a few quick other things here on Jrue. My favorite destination for Jrue has always been Golden State. I think Golden State, if they get him, they're the title favorite, even above Milwaukee at this point. You look at what they could do at that point with Steph. You could play a lineup of Steph, Jrue, Klay Thompson, Wiggins, Draymond Green, and that is like an absolute fucking death lineup. You could go big with Looney and Draymond. You wouldn't have to rely on Jrue to create as much offensively because you have Stephen Curry, and that would be incredibly valuable for him. Like, there are just so many different iterations of that work. And on top of it, they have this expiring Chris Paul deal now that really gives them a significant, substantial ability to facilitate any deal that they want to. And if there was one player I was trying to acquire for the Golden State Warriors, like right now, I think it would be Jrue Holiday. Like I actually think that he's the one that lines up best. So I look at this and I'm just like, why? You could do like Chris Paul, Kuminga, and like pods and like a first for Jrue Holiday. And yeah, I guess that's a lot of value, but you're Golden State and you're trying to win a title and you decided to lock in with Draymond and Andrew Wiggins this offseason. Jonathan Kuminga, it's going to be hard to play Kuminga in the playoffs with Draymond Green for the rest of this core, which is at least 3 more years. It's going to be hard to play like Gary Payton II with Jonathan Kuminga, frankly, because of that. To me, Kuminga is like a really interesting trade asset league wide. And if I was Portland, I would have interest in him for sure. He's an interesting, talented player. I just think the way that Golden State's roster is set up right now, like Kuminga makes a lot of sense to move. And if you're getting a really interesting former top 7 pick for Jrue Holiday, plus you're getting maybe 1 pick out into the future, and you're getting, something else. It could be Podziemski, it could be, whatever you want it to be. That feels like a win across the board for everybody to me.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Jrue, that's a California kid. Obviously not from the Bay, he's from LA, but still, I think lifestyle would agree with him. Championship potential would agree with him. I do think it kind of makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to remember what's the word Mike Dunleavy used yesterday when he was talking to Slater. They're on a championship time horizon right now. For this time horizon, that is correct. You need to,
it lines up.
You need to maximize it, and you need to do everything that you can to win right now with those guys. Because I think when you look at Draymond and Clay, I think every year could be the year where it goes sideways. And I'm not predicting that this year. They could both be great, but there is a non-zero chance that this is the year where it's like end of the road. Just they don't have the bounce. They don't have any of that. And I know how good Clay was last year, and I know Draymond put together a really nice postseason. But like, I think you have to worry about that.
Need defenders. Like that's the thing. Like Clay was good offensively last season, but he has dropped off slightly on defense at this point. So I like that spot. I've seen people bring up Philadelphia. I mean, is Philadelphia giving up Tyrese Maxey? I mean, if they are, great. Sounds good. If they're not, then I don't really see it for Philly because the Clippers don't have anything to give for James Harden that Portland should be interested in at the end of the day. Boston is one that I love. I love the idea of like Malcolm Brogdon's salary plus something else. I don't know that I would want to give up Al Horford if I'm Boston because he's the center that stays healthy there. And that's really important for them. I get it that, you have Rob and you have Kristaps now, and you might think Horford is expendable, but I'd feel concerned about that. And I know that like the money that's how you make the money work basically is by giving up Horford. But man, that's a tricky one to me. The other team is Dallas. Like if you wanted to get the thing I said on the last podcast about Dallas was point of attack defense for Luka and Kyrie. Like that's what you want. You want to pair them with like a great point of attack defender who can also like somewhat manage wings. And that's why I like Josh Green as a starter for them.
Yep.
What if you moved Josh Green and some of their contract ballast and Omax or something like that for Jrue Holiday? The problem is they don't have any pick capital at this point, which makes it a lot harder. But again, you've gotten your long-term pick capital now. Maybe you are more willing to do like a bit more of a current contracted long-term value kind of thing. So I'm intrigued by all of that with them.
Yeah. I mean, as you said before, Jrue Holiday is a spectacular player. I can't imagine there's going to be a shortage of teams around the league that want, and again, these things take time. I think right at the start of the season is a really tough time to do a trade. Obviously we just saw one pulled off, but it's really tough. Everyone's at their roster max. Everyone's thinking about, let's get off to a great start. These are our people. This is our team. This is the squad that we believe in. So it is very possible that this takes a little while. And you figure out exactly who's in on Jrue and how in they are on Jrue. And Jrue starts the season in Portland and actually helps out that young roster. Like, he could be helpful for them for the first 20 games or so as you figure this out. But yeah, I don't think there's gonna be a shortage of teams that would like having Jrue Holiday on their roster.
And then with Jrue, the other landing spot is probably, if Portland is willing to deal with Miami, which, look, again, my opinion on all of this, I mentioned this previously, is that teams will work through whatever they have to work through. Again, I don't think Miami could actually top this offer from Milwaukee, and it just makes the most sense to me. Let's move to Phoenix now. Can you explain this to me?
No. It's a tough one for me too, because I think I saw DeAndre Ayton at or near his best in the 2021 playoffs, where it was like the first 2 games of the finals, the Bucks tried to switch on him and he just punished them. Absolutely destroyed them. And it was like, I don't know if they have an answer. And then Ayton wasn't as effective and the Bucks stopped switching as much, and they figured out some things. But that was on the heels of an entire Western Conference playoffs where it was like, oh, this is a dude. He can play. And I don't know, like, I get the blood is really bad there, and they've had a rough 2 years since that moment. But I think I'm probably a bigger fan of Ayton than most people. Like, it just feels like I don't get throwing your hands up in the air and being like, well, I guess we can't do anything with this young guy that has at least shown the potential to be an impact player in the postseason. That's just something you throw away. Like, okay.
How many centers have been genuinely impactful in the playoffs recently?
And
by the way, DeAndre was not this year, so like,
right.
It's been a roller coaster. I get that, but
yeah, I mean, like, Brook Lopez has done it in Milwaukee. I'd say Rob Will and Al Horford in Boston. Embiid has been impactful, but not as impactful as he should be. Jokic, obviously.
Obviously Jokic, but like, it's minimal is the point here. And with DeAndre, what worries me is, like, are they thinking that Nurkic is a better defender than him? Like, is that the idea? Because the tape last year does not bear that out. And look, I want to give the caveats, and maybe this is where I try and give like the case for maybe what Phoenix is thinking here. Jusuf Nurkic had a calf injury last year. Okay. Couldn't move, maybe, let's say. He really couldn't move, man. Like, he had very little chance in ball screen defense at any point last year. And part of it, frankly, like, it didn't feel like the effort was great either for Jusuf. And that's not a great sign either. But maybe you get him to Phoenix, the effort is better. Maybe the calf injury is healed. It all looks a little bit better. There's also the potential idea that he's just a better offensive fit because he's a little bit better of a screener than DeAndre is. Like, maybe you could make that case. I'll hear that out, maybe. But the big case here is, like, you're cutting this contract from DeAndre into multiple pieces, and you're not investing as much in the center position anymore. And you have Nasir Little and Grayson Allen now, who can be impactful players and round out your depth. I think that's the center position is just so much more important for them than having depth. I think you can find the depth. And I think that this is a huge opportunity cost failure for Phoenix, where, like, I think that there probably would have been a better deal for DeAndre at some point than Jusuf Nurkic and a couple of guys. Grayson's definitely a rotation player, but like, we have no idea if Nasir Little's a rotation player on a good team yet, at least. He was in Portland and was like somewhat valuable when he was healthy, but like, we don't know what that looks like yet for him in a tough, real game environment yet. So this is so bizarre to me. Like Nurkic was like rough last year. He was not good. And on top of it, Phoenix is basically has imported Portland's center rotation from last year. And like, I like Drew Eubanks just fine, but like, that was the worst defense, if not the worst defense in the league. It was bottom 3 defense in large part because of their inability to protect the rim. I don't get this at all for Phoenix. This makes like very, very little sense to me.
I mean, it just feels like that relationship was so wrecked that they wanted to find a way out. Like, I think it's hard to explain it without that being the case, right? And I mean, as you talked about, maybe down the road there's a better trade for Ayton, and it just seems like they weren't willing to do 20 games of it, like to find that, or to let that whatever team it is figure out that they do want Ayton. And I don't know, it just feels like that is it's an organizational failure in the 2 years where you thought you may need to do this, right? Like, you straight up had Jay Crowder sit out for an entire season, and Jay Crowder wasn't good for the Bucks this year. He might be actually kind of important for them this year. But he wasn't good for them last year, and you just decided to toss away a year of Jay Crowder when he was starting in NBA Finals games. And because of that, then now you've decided to trade just the way that they managed all of their assets. And that's not to say that they're not going to be one of the best teams in the West, right? They got a lot of freaking talent. And,
right.
Matt Ishbia's really pushed all in here. So they're going to be fine. But yeah, as you look through the asset management, it's just, it's a tough look.
Well, and so here's the other thing. It's not even just asset management. It's like, it's like asset combined with relationship management, kind of. This all started, in my opinion, in 2021 when they chose not to extend DeAndre Ayton. He was very clearly not happy about that. And it seems like it poisoned the well a bit in terms of how he felt about the organization. And then on top of it, after he had quite a good year last year, like he was one of the 10 best centers in the league in terms of metrics, like advanced metrics, which theoretically should not like DeAndre Ayton, still liked DeAndre Ayton last year. And then they still made him go out and find an offer from somebody.
Yeah.
It's just not how you go about business with a player that, like, you've talked about before, having like motivational questions. The way that they handled the DeAndre Ayton asset to me was very, very mismanaged. If you didn't want to pay him, you trade him before you pay him. You don't trade him now where you're getting a player that, like, I do not think Jusuf Nurkic can play in the playoffs. Like, point blank. I think that I've seen some people speculate, yeah, like maybe they're trying to get him because they think he's a better defender on Nikola Jokic than DeAndre Ayton is. Sure. Do you know what they're going to do to Jusuf Nurkic every time? They're just going to put him in a ball screen with Jamal Murray every time, and he's not going to have a chance, I don't think, in the playoffs. So I don't see this. You at least know that DeAndre had a chance. But to me, like, look, I think like Michael Orlando like brings it up. Phoenix dumping Ayton for a broken player says a lot about how they felt about Ayton. Like, I don't know if Nurkic is broken, but I know that he's not what he was.
Right.
And to me, it's just like kind of it's a mishandling of the DeAndre Ayton asset for the last 2.5 years that ended with this. And it's pure mismanagement by Phoenix, in my opinion. And look, I have to caveat every fucking thing I say with Phoenix with James Jones has been right in a lot of circumstances where I thought he was crazy. And the Cam Johnson pick stands out as a really good example of that, right? Like, he nailed the Cam Johnson pick. There are a few others over the years where I was just like, what are they doing? and it worked. So maybe James Jones sees something I don't. I want to preface that by saying that, but I don't know, man. Like a KD Booker Beal Nurkic combo feels a lot less exciting to me than what they have now
Yeah, I mean, I think
or what they had before.
sure. No, I do think Ayton would have been more interesting, certainly. I don't know. Like I said, when you first tossed it over to me to talk what the Suns are doing, one, I don't get it, and two, if I can rationalize it anyway, it does just feel like the relationship got to be so bad that this is what they needed to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, this is a weird one. Very, very weird. I just don't know why they were so gung ho on getting into this deal. Like it felt like from the time that, and by the way, John Gambadoro got so much shit on the internet for reporting this on September 21st. And he was dead on. He nailed it. That the Suns were interested in Nurkic and thought it was like an interesting upgrade. Now, like, if he got told that and then he said the defensive upgrade thing, I wonder if that means that the Suns think that on DeAndre. We shall see. I don't agree, but we shall see. Eric, that's all I've got. Tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what you've got coming up because you're going to be writing on this deal now for a week.
That's right.
Tell the people what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, we should have up as we close this out my story up at The Athletic just about the trade, the message that it sends to the world, and also Giannis Antetokounmpo, and just the whole idea of pushing in this way. And in many ways, a year after having a historic upset in the first round, going for it again and pushing all of your chips into the table and saying, "Let's do this. Let's go try to win Giannis Antetokounmpo's second NBA title." After that, we're gonna look at some film of Dame Lillard and see all the ways that the Bucks can use him and how interesting it can get. And then after that, we're probably going to look at all of the cap implications, which at this moment aren't bad. Luxury tax for this season, if they don't fill the 15th spot, it doesn't even go up. It goes down, actually. If they do, it goes up slightly. But again, this is more forward thinking. And I'm sure I will talk to Danny LaRue about all of that. So, yes, as you said, there will be Dame Lillard story after Dame Lillard story after Dame Lillard story. I guess it would be a Dame Lillard press conference at some point, or maybe let us wait until Media Day and introduce Dame at Media Day on Monday. But either way, it is going to be a busy weekend over at The Athletic. And you can follow me on Twitter at Eric_Nehm, Nehm.
Eric's the best. Go follow his work. I will have something up on this deal tomorrow. I have to write about it. It's too bizarre to me. That's all I've got though. Stay subscribed to the podcast. And, I was planning on doing like a big Alex R breakdown from the Ignite games. And now this has just completely blown that up. We will see whether or not that occurs, but I will be doing stuff on The Athletic is the best way to put it. And I will have another podcast at least on Sunday night. We'll see whether or not I do another one this week, but this is a good emergency podcast with Eric. Until next time, we will talk soon.